It's 20 to 8, and if you've had an ear on the radio or kept an eye on the newspapers this week, you will be aware that the 2011 census figures were published earlier this week. The statistics reveal that despite falling numbers, Christianity remains the largest religion in England and Wales. Muslims are the next biggest religious group and have grown in the last decade, while the proportion of the population who say they have no religion accounts for a quarter. The figures for us here in Leicester and Leicestershire are as follows. Leicester's Christian population is 32% compared to 59% nationally. Then 15% Hindu compared to 1.5% nationally, and 18% Muslim, 4.8% for the rest of the country. 4% are Sikh and 22% say they have no religion. Leicestershire is 60.3% Christian, with no other religion accounting for more than 2%. 26% in the county say they have no religion. David Bartram is a sociologist from the University of Leicester. He said this on BBC Radio Leicester earlier in the week.
As you'd expect, there's all sorts of screaming headlines in some of the newspapers about the big jump in immigrants, and I think there's some really misleading stuff going on here. The idea is that there's a big increase in the number of foreign-born people, but to simply take that number and turn it all into immigrants, I think really misses the way that immigrants have a strong tendency to become British. So that, there's various data on the rate at which people become British citizens within 5 years of having moved here. And if you run through some of these numbers, I mean, instead of England and Wales having something like more than 7 million immigrants here, you've got 7 million people that have been born abroad, but the majority of those have become British citizens. And so I think it's really questionable whether the word immigrant is really the right term to apply.
That's David Bartram, a sociologist from the University of Leicester. With me in the studio, live and ready to speak, is Raj Mann, human rights activist, chair of the Leicester Sikh Alliance. He's pored over the numbers and is eager to tell us about his analysis of them. And sitting beside him is Alan Hayes from the Leicester Secular Society. Raj and Alan, good morning to both of you. Can we start with you, Raj? If we talk about local figures, is there anything we should be surprised about?
Nothing too surprising, except one figure on language that sprung from the page for me. I think it was 18% of households in the city of Leicester, 18% nobody speaks English as the main language, which I thought was quite shocking, and chimes with Millerman's speech about compulsory English standards for those who come into this country. Now, as a Sikh, I'm split about this. As a British Sikh, should I say, I'm split about this. My Britishness says to me that, yes, we should share the same culture, the same sense of humour and things like that. And of course language is an imperative for that. But I know many Sikh households where both parents did not speak English when they first came here, and Sikhs are now well adjusted and outperforming other religions in terms of education, disposable income levels and things like that. But that could well be idiosyncrasies of my culture and may not apply across all cultures, but that needs to be further analysed and how pertinent that is to future integration.
Well, do you not think things like that is the whole one-size-fits-all? It never works. You're talking about people here, it never works.
Yes, it works up to a certain degree, and I think I've seen people come over, especially when people from my own culture, marry partners from the homeland, India, etc., and some of their partners don't speak English, and just out of probably sheer laziness, and if there was some imperative, some requirement, I think they will ship you their studies along and learn a competent level of English.
Was the rise in the fact that there are more Muslims than Hindus in the city, did you find that particularly significant in the census figures?
Not at all, no. The Muslims, it's a religion, it's not really an ethnicity, it's not really a race, and in Leicester, the Muslims come from, mainly from Africa, and that can be further subdivided into Somalians and those Ugandan Asians as well, There's a significant amount of Indian Muslims, especially Gujarati Muslims as well. In fact, the stereotype from some tabloids of the Pakistani Muslim is actually on national average of 2% in Leicester. So it's very mixed, which is a good sign. Very kind of polarised, if I can use that word in a positive sense. And you know, I've got a lot more in common with a Pakistani Muslim from Punjab, from my homeland, and also an Indian Muslim than I have from someone in perhaps the south of India.
Mm. Yes, yeah, it's a good point that you make, and again, Alan, I wonder about the style of questions on the census. Are they giving us the information that we need, or that is relevant about society?
Well, they're probably still not getting down to the people who just want to be regarded as people and don't want to be labelled. And looking at the results, of course, there's some satisfaction in seeing people putting themselves down as no religion, but looked at positively, are they people who simply have faith in people? And I think that's what we've got to look at. Looking at them from a distance, as I was asked to recently, there are two ways of looking at these things. One is that it provides compartments, boxes into which people are being put and asked to think of themselves in this way primarily before anything else. And the other way of looking at the situation in Leicester is a wonderful opportunity to show that people who are different and have different contributions to make to society can get together and share these contributions. But there's a lot of the structure of the present society which is against this. For example, the move towards faith schools worries me considerably. Are we going to be separated not just geographically where we live, but also in the schools? Are we going to have a proper educational system in religious education that will emphasise our humanity, first of all, and then bring in the religions as contributing to this in various ways, and bringing in the contribution of many people who are not in religions, but have a very clear view of what it is to be a good human being and a good society, which is what the secular society has always fought for. And it's being very much maligned at the moment, and I think this is a very dangerous move indeed.
Do you think then that it was the style of... I mean, is it even relevant to ask people about their religious convictions? Would you get a more reflective, a more representative answer if you phrase the question differently?
I think that's so. For example, if you ask them, do you have a religion? If so, what is it? Then we get very different answers from what is your religion,
yeah,
and allowing them to opt out. It's rather like the situation with regard to religious education. People are allowed to opt out, which is not a very good way of recognising that we have different views. What we need is something that's inclusive, both in the schools and in the way we treat people as people, treating them that way first, and then bringing in any contributions or differences or arguments, because that's what young people like. They like to be challenged, they like to argue with one another, as I've found, because I'm of course on the local Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education, have been for 10 years. And it's wonderful how young people can open up with one another. It's interesting for them. And life stances are interesting, what you do with your life. And that's where I think we should start, bringing people together. And also bringing people together instead of just having a situation where we bring in a speaker who speaks to the converted already. We need to bring people together with two speakers perhaps.
Yes, on either side.
Possibly on either side,
yeah.
but there's a danger in getting debates where you expect one side to win at the end of it. What we need are discussions where we can share differences and sameness of our approach, because we all have the same idea of what it is to be a good person. We may approach it from different directions and be informed or consider the authority as coming in from a different direction, but basically we've got to share these approaches, because we're not going to succeed in a diverse society like we have in the country as well as in Leicester, unless we use every opportunity to find out what it is to be a human being, to be a good human being, and bring up our children to recognise it and want to be it.
It's interesting you should say that, Raj, nodding away furiously with a copy of the Sunday Times in front of you, because you're quoted in the paper today. What's the title of the article? But it's essentially, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet this morning, aren't we?
Yes, I mean, I agree totally with what Mr. Hayes has just said. In relation to the religious schools, yes, I also believe that education should be purely secular, same as government. However, certain religions have got their schools, so the Sikhs are now bidding for their school as well, to offer choice, to be on an even keel with all other religions. But in a perfect world, I think a secular education where all religions are taught and celebrated with equal gusto, as well as the humanist theologies as well, is utopian. And furthermore, Mr. Hayes makes a very good point about values, about human values. I mean, if you've got a mathematical mind about fractions, then we often, fixate on the lowest common denominator of religions, what divides us. But no one recognises the highest common factor of honesty, shared values, and just day-to-day being nice people. And I think the secular voice is very important to draw out the highest common factors of all religions, which I think we all share. And I thank him for his voice over the years for doing that. But going back to the Sunday Times, there's a focus article in the main paper. England, Their England is the title, and the premise of the journalist is that integration is going on, but has its limits. And I think Mr. Raymond, journalist, makes a very fair point. And the first witness, if I can say that, is a Hindu teacher in Odeby, who is quoted to say, "Everyone's living in their own little pocket." And she's a retired JP and quite experienced as well. And the article goes on. It's quite balanced. He talks about Sikhs celebrating Christmas and things like that, and the mix of Odeby, and he is talking about Odeby and Wixton being a prosperous suburb, and on the face of it looks very integrated, but he's trying to get out what's behind the scenes. And the Demos, the think tank, have said, their premise is that the less racist we become as a society, more tribal we become. And this follows on from what Trevor Phillips, the chair of the Commission for Racial Equality, a few years said about Leicester, that although we're a community of communities, how much integration does really take place? And I found some contradictions in what the local press was saying, people from so-called community leaders, and I'm quoted in the paper, saying that I belly laugh when so-called community leaders comment in a local rag that it was pleasing to see so many other faiths at our religious festivals. It's complete baloney, and I stand by that comment. But I do temper it with a positive comment. An Afro-Caribbean carnival is an example of what works in the real world. Music, drink, and food seem to transcend. And in Leicester, if anyone's been to the Afro-Caribbean carnival, and I'm shocked that their budget is under review, would agree that it's a fantastic celebration of all people. If you go to Diwali, although you get the comments from people and the, if I can call them, the public relations of the festival councils saying how good it was to see other faiths, but that's propaganda. If you look at the photographs and you see people of a certain colour, and I dare say a certain faith as well. In particular, the Diwali festival, which is supposed to combine Sikh, Hindu and Jain religious theologies, it focuses heavily on the Hindu story of Diwali and forgets the Sikh story of Bandi Chor, we call it, where one of our gurus was given release from prison, but would only let himself be free if he's allowed to free other prisoners who were prisoners of conscience, or political prisoners, And that story, that very important human rights story, a humanist story, I would say, as well, is not given any prominence. And we feel that that publicly funded festivals should be, interfaith, should be commensurate to the population at large as well, and the city council and the city mayor needs to put caveats, protocols in place so that festivals do truly integrate.
But do you think, Alan, do you think it's important that festivals as such do truly integrate? I mean, if it's your celebration, do you want gate crashers, or would you see them as gate crashers necessarily?
I think one's got to distinguish between festivals that are particularly for the religion, and you can't impose on people there, but when it's meant to be a public festival, and the Afro-Caribbean is obviously one, we should be meeting together, but there should be more pressure coming from the top to open up festivals where we are meeting together. I'd like to see a celebration of Leicester. We've got a great deal to celebrate, but we don't. I'd like to see something like that. For example, it was a very sad occasion when I wasn't allowed as chaplain to the Lord Mayor to speak in the cathedral on the civic service. Now, that was an opportunity that was sadly missed, and that leads me to look for an opportunity to bring people together for the city as a whole, with contributions from all directions and from all aspects of life, celebrating the music, the theatre, the industry, the commerce, the history of the city, so that we can really see ourselves as one.
Do you think it's harmful in a way too, because you've both sat there and given me examples of times when you were not comfortable with something that happened? Do you think if we focus on things like that where we're not part of something, would that then increase tension between faiths or no faiths, or just increase tension between groups of people, that everybody feels aggrieved about something?
No, I don't think so. That's why I prefaced my remarks by saying that there are some celebrations that are clearly very much for a particular group, but we must look outside, and we must get away from this idea that people who are not in the regular religions don't have faith. I have faith in people. We've come through a lot together as the human race, and we've succeeded, and we've got to continue to succeed, and we've got big challenges ahead of us, both locally in the city and looking at the climate change, for example. We've got a whole planet to take care of, and that's the big problem. And we've got to look across the world as well to see the Muslims of the wrong colour, as it were, in Syria who are being attacked. Or in Pakistan, I was recently talking to someone. We've got to see people as people primarily and respect their rights to have a religion, but because it's their right as human beings, and it's how human beings function.
We're fast approaching the news at 8 o'clock. Last word goes to you, Raj. How do you feel the future of the city is standing in the light of the article in the paper today and the figures from the census?
I think the future lies in the neglect of the so-called forgotten estates, the white working-class estates of Leicester, and the New Parks, the Braunstons, and places like that. These estates, it has been well documented, are not engaging, they're being neglected, and there's great responsibility to engage them. I think the £61 million publicly funded Curb Theatre should go further to these hard-to-reach communities and get them engaging, because at the moment, on my kind of observations, that theatre is being used by white middle-class folk and not culturally being used by people of that socio-economic group, and I think that's the big challenge ahead.
Big challenges for the city as a whole, I think. Thank you, both of you, very much indeed for coming in this morning. Good to talk to you. It is BBC Radio Leicester. The news at 8 o'clock follows.